Racing pigeon droppings typically contain the following. Uric acid, this is the white portion of pigeon poop. Uric acid is the major metabolic product of protein digestion in birds. It is analogous to the urea found in mammalian urine. Fecal matter, the darker portion of pigeon droppings contains the actual fecal matter, which is the undigested contents of the digestive tract. This includes waste, bacteria, fibers, and other indigestible components. Calcium and phosphorus, racing pigeons need additional calcium and phosphorus to support egg laying and growth. These minerals get excreted out in their droppings. Here are some tips for making high-quality compost from racing pigeon droppings. What makes racing pigeon droppings good for composting? Racing pigeons are a uniquely prolific source of droppings that have excellent properties, making them an ideal ingredient for premium compost. But why are their droppings so valuable for composting? Pigeons and other avian species have a digestive system uniquely adapted for their high energy needs and grain-heavy diet. Their digestive process results in feces concentrated with nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and other nutrients essential for plants and soil health. Nitrogen values from dried pigeon manure easily range between 3 to 8% nitrogen content by dry weight. This is substantially higher compared to the 1 to 2% nitrogen content present in other types of manure like cow, horse, or cattle manure. The more nitrogen in the starting compost source, the richer the finished compost. Most other plentiful compost inputs like dried leaves, wood chips, hay, or straw have carbon but very little nitrogen value. These racing pigeons are also feeding on a nutrient-rich diet optimized for endurance, health, and competitive flying ability. Their specialized feed and diverse mineral supplementation means their droppings contain a cornucopia of major nutrients, trace minerals and vitamins that can be recycled into your garden soil via composting. Additionally, unlike wild pigeons, racing pigeons' exposure to parasites and diseases is highly controlled and minimized as the birds receive excellent veterinary care. This makes their dropping low risk from pathogen contamination compared to other types of waste. Getting started, basic composting guidelines. Composting of any kind requires some basic ratios, best practices, tools and techniques in order for the decomposition process to be as efficient and thorough as possible. There are some core composting concepts to understand before delving into the specifics of using pigeon droppings. Compost pile ratios. Maintenance of the balance between greens and browns is key to a properly functioning compost system. Greens refer to nitrogen-rich materials like manure, fresh veggie scraps or fresh grass trimmings. Browns refer to carbon-rich materials like dried leaves, wood chips, cardboard, straw or sawdust. The ideal mixture is 2 to 3 parts browns to every 1 part greens. This carbon-nitrogen ratio between 25 and 40 to 1 is ideal. Too many greens and the pile risks becoming overly dense, slimy and anaerobic. Too many browns and the composting process slows significantly. Particle size. Smaller pieces break down faster. Chopping up large matter into smaller bits before adding them to the pile will speed decomposition. A diversity of particle sizes prevents the pile from becoming too tightly packed and helps airflow. Moisture and aeration. The ideal moisture content of an active compost pile is between 40 to 60%. The center of the pile should feel damp, but not soggy. Well-drained materials like wood chips and straw keep air pockets to prevent excess moisture. The compost must be periodically turned to refresh air flow into the pile center. Microbes cannot thrive without proper oxygen levels. Temperature. An active compost pile will self-heat to 110 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit as beneficial bacteria grow. Monitoring temperatures alerts you to when the pile needs turning or moisture adjustment. Volume. Compost piles smaller than 3 feet cubed may have trouble retaining heat and moisture effectively, slowing the compost process. Having a minimum of 1 yard 3 of material is a good starting target. Setting up the pigeon manure compost pile. Composting equipment and materials. Before gathering the pigeon droppings, it is useful to first prepare the equipment and materials for where the composting will occur. Compost containers. Compost piles can be made directly on soil or grass, but using some form of container keeps things tidy. Recycled wood pallets, fenced enclosures using wire mesh, or even pre-made plastic bins can contain the pile nicely. Allow at least a 3-foot cube zone for the compost volume. Having multiple compost piles with one finishing while another starts again for new waste additions is efficient. Tools and aeration. Garden forks, shovels, and spades assist with mixing and aerating. Having a long-handled compost thermometer allows you to easily monitor core temperatures. Screen mesh can strain finished compost for application. Some sort of tarp helps cover the compost during extremely wet or windy periods. Bed layer. Place 3 to 6 inches of high carbon browns like wood chips, sawdust, straw or dried leaves directly on the ground or bin floor to form a base. This allows for drainage and airflow underneath the compost to prevent overly soggy conditions. Ready mix of browns. In a separate containment right beside your compost setup, prepare extra bins of additional high carbon browns like dried leaves, wood chips or straw to mix into the pigeon droppings later. Calculate to have roughly 2 times more brown material bulk-wise compared to the amount of pigeon manure added. Collecting and preparing the pigeon droppings. Pigeon droppings can simply be collected off the floors of your pigeon lofts. To gather them contact-free, you may choose to wear gloves, rake or sweep up the materials into bins. It is ideal to gather the droppings before they get overly mixed with other bedding material or trampled underfoot, as composting works best with pure manure. Ideally, collect droppings immediately after your pigeons have spent a good deal of time locked in the loft following a race or exercise. This allows a large quantity of quality droppings to accumulate freshly off the birds. Depending on the time of year, most lofts need thorough cleaning once every 2 weeks or up to once weekly. This can yield several 5-gallon buckets worth each time. You may keep collecting droppings from multiple loft cleanings if need be until you have enough volume worth creating your first compost batch. Filling at least 1 yard 3 bin, 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet, makes a good starting point. Amounts can always be scaled up over time as supply allows given your racing team's size. The most important preparation step for the pigeon droppings is achieving an appropriate moisture level before compost addition. Racing pigeon manure tends to be fairly dry as it has high uric acid content and has been kept covered in lofts. Some gentle pulverizing into smaller crumbles and chaff can be done. Then soak and mix the manure until no dry pockets remain. An ideal 40% moisture content is like a damp wrung-out sponge, moist but not dripping wet. Allow the manure to absorb moisture for at least 24 hours before making final moisture assessments. Building the pigeon manure compost pile. Once your pigeon droppings have been collected, prepared and moisturized, you are ready to build your compost pile. Follow this layered construction process for best results. 1. Place your first 6-inch base layer of high carbon browns like wood chips or straw across your compost area to improve drainage and ventilation. 2. Apply 2 to 4 inches of pre-moistened pigeon manure directly on top of the carbon base layer, distributing it evenly. 3. Cover pigeon manure completely with a 4 to 6 inch thick blanket layer of additional high carbon dried browns. Moisten these lightly as they are added. 4. Use a garden fork to gently mix the top browns layer together with the pigeon manure layer beneath, chopping and integrating about halfway down. Do not dig into or disturb the bottom wood chip drainage layer. 5. Add another 2-inch layer of soaked pigeon droppings, then recover with 4 inches of more high carbon amendments. Repeat the gentle fork integration process to mix the next layers together without compromising the bottom. 6. Check moisture levels of the mixed compost using the squeeze test. If needed, sprinkle on some additional water to bring moisture to 40 to 60% as additional thin layers of browns and pigeon manure are added. 7. Continue the piling process until your entire prepared volume of manure and browns have been layered together into the compost bins, ending with a top layer of high carbon woody amendments. 8. Optional, some composters choose to cover the very top carbon layer with a waterproof tarp to retain heat and moisture at the start while natural decomposition ramps up. Maintaining your pigeon manure compost. Active management. With ideal construction and ingredients, microbes will start breaking down your racing pigeon manure quickly, using available nitrogen and carbon energy sources. Within days you should notice temperatures rising. Monitoring and maintenance is key. Track internal temperatures in the compost's core weekly by plunging your compost thermometer deep into the center of the pile in several areas. Turn and mix up entire compost pile contents thoroughly whenever internal temperatures start to plateau or fall below 110 F. Use your shovel and fork to chop and fluff up all contents, moving cooler outer layers into the center. This revives airflow to support the microbes and regain heating. Check that moisture levels remain between 40 to 60% each time you turn and mix the compost. If needed, sprinkle on some additional water and mix together as the pile is refreshed. Supplement with extra high carbon amendments like dried leaves or wood chips if heating seems to taper off too soon or pile becomes too dense. This ensures the browns to greens ratio stays balanced. Repeat the turning and remixing process weekly or whenever temperatures start to drop until consistent high temperature heating and decomposition have been maintained for at least 1 month after pile construction. 130 to 150 F sustained temperatures indicate an active, self-heating compost pile. Curing and finishing. After several cycles of active turning and heating have been maintained for 4 to 8 weeks, temperatures will gradually start to reduce and composting enters the final curing phase. At this stage your compost is still not ready to use yet. Allow finished compost to sit undisturbed in a pile or bin for 1 to 3 months to complete the curing process as microbial activity slowly finishes up availability of remaining carbon and nitrogen energy sources. The compost will fully mature, darken and develop the characteristic earthy smell of rich organic matter. You may choose to transfer curing compost to a secondary container or bay for storage during the mellowing process if your initial compost bins are needed again for the next batch. Check for any sections that seem overly wet, dry, or compacted during curing and adjust mixing to improve consistency one last time before final application. Once fully cured, you may screen your dark, crumbly compost through 1/2-inch mesh wire to remove any remaining wood debris and homogenize particles if desired right before garden application. Using finished Racing Pigeon manure compost. After following the steps for proper balanced construction, sustained active heating, mellow curing and screening, you will have transformed pigeon droppings into dark, earthy, nutrient-rich compost ready to use in your garden, any garden beds or potted plants. Compost improves soil structure to support healthier plants and provides a slow-release source of major and minor plant nutrients naturally via the decomposition process. Mix your Racing Pigeon manure compost into soil across your garden beds when planting or to nourish already growing plants. Incorporate compost into potting soil for container gardens as well. Compost from Racing Pigeon manure makes an excellent sustainable base for creating your own custom blended potting media tailored to your unique soils and plants. Done correctly, composting pigeon manure requires some effort, but rewards you with a high-value, free source of plant nutrition you can rely on season after season. So go ahead and put those prolific pigeon droppings to work creating compost for thriving gardens. There are many reasons to buy my Racing Pigeon method. Here are some of the best reasons. You will get excellent results. It's a very simple system to use. It's affordable. I have had over 400 first prize winners. It's adaptable to any situation. You can use it with any racing method, natural, widowhood, young birds. It's a very effective method. There is no need to spend a lot of money on fancy pigeon products. It's a reliable system and it is foolproof to use. Professional athletes, race horses, take the same products. There is science behind this, not just hearsay. It is all to do with red blood cells and oxygen in the blood. Without that, a pigeon will not race well, or an athlete will not win a race. If he has low oxygen in his blood, the above is fact and is 100% science. There are a few things you can do to improve your chances of winning at Racing Pigeons. One of the most important things is to learn as much as you can about the sport. You'll need to know the different types of pigeons, how to train them, and how to race them. Another key factor is practice. You'll need to be able to fly your pigeons competently in order to win races. And, of course, you'll need to have the funds to invest in Racing Pigeons and other racing equipment.